The story opened with Letitia's fury spilling into the clearing. She stood before Haru, questioning him sharply about whether he was joking with her, pressing him to explain what he had been thinking by carelessly engaging with such a weak creature. She reminded him that she had assumed a monster of that level would be simple enough for even someone as unskilled as him to handle. Haru, embarrassed, muttered an apology, but she dismissed it instantly, demanding what value such an empty apology held. She further emphasized that if she had not intervened, his head would have been crushed by now. Meanwhile, a group of 2 men and a girl gathered around the slain monster, commenting that Letitia was as exceptional as always. They noted how she had split the creature cleanly in half with a single strike, and that she stood on an entirely different plane as a hero. One of them clarified that the title of hero was bestowed upon only 7 people in the entire world, and Letitia was not only the youngest in history, but also the strongest of them. The girl added that Letitia was beautiful, kind-hearted, and remarkable in every way, even showing concern for someone as unreliable as Haru. Yet her tone faltered as she observed that Letitia and Haru still had not returned. Another man mentioned that she had gone to examine Haru's wounds and wondered if his condition had been more serious than they initially thought. Meanwhile, deeper in the forest, Haru reflected on how completely Letitia deceived everyone. None of them would ever believe the real side of her, the side hidden beneath the heroic praise. Letitia urged him to hurry and apologize, warning that their party members might come searching for them. Haru believed he alone received this treatment. He was not just a comrade but her childhood friend. It had not always been like this, but ever since she had been chosen as a hero, he was certain she used him to vent her frustrations. Letitia laughed dismissively at him, calling him useless, and questioned if his only remaining purpose was to serve as her shield and die for her. The cruelty in her words made Haru rise abruptly. She immediately snapped, demanding to know why he stood when she had instructed him to kneel and press his forehead to the ground before the others arrived. He met her gaze, stating that he could no longer obey her commands. Unable to accept his defiance, Letitia brandished her sword toward him, demanding how he dared talk back. She warned that if he did not want to be expelled from the party, he had better follow her orders. But Haru ignored her entirely and began to walk away. For a moment, Letitia stood frozen, then called out his name in stunned disbelief. He stopped only to remind her that she had been the one to declare he would be removed from the party if he continued refusing her. Tension rose in her voice as she quickly told him he could at least submit the quest completion to the guild, even though that had always been her responsibility. Haru declined, stating that it no longer concerned him. She called his name repeatedly, urging him to wait, but he kept moving forward without looking back. Sadness pressed heavily on him, as he reflected on the real reason he had allowed himself to struggle against that weak monster. He had only wanted to confirm how she truly felt. The Letitia he once knew would never have declared that serving as her shield and dying for her was the only purpose left for him. The girl he remembered was already gone. Later, when he returned to the guild, the receptionist called out sharply to him, addressing him as Haru the traitor, demanding to know why he would abandon the hero's party after 5 long years. Haru simply smiled and stated that he had his reasons. He asked her to process his paperwork and then wondered aloud if it might be too sudden to check whether any solo requests were available. He thought that being forced out of the party might have been for the best. Letitia had mistreated him for so long that it would not have been shocking if her true personality had eventually surfaced. Yet, despite everything, he found himself questioning why he still worried about her now that freedom was finally his. The receptionist's tone then softened as she apologized, explaining that there were no quests open to solo adventurers. Haru's body tensed as uncertainty settled over him. He had no other plan and, worse, no money left. At that moment, a girl approached and introduced herself as Alice Sprite, asking if they could speak privately. When he agreed, Alice explained that she too was a solo adventurer and unable to secure worthwhile quests because of it. She asked if he would consider forming a party with her. Haru expressed his gratitude but insisted that he was weak and would only become a burden. Alice appeared puzzled and pointed out that he had been a member of the hero's party. He confirmed it but hesitated, unsure how to reveal that he had been nothing more than the group's errand boy. She struggled to understand and questioned how someone who was part of the hero's group could call himself weak. To make her believe him, Haru silently presented his adventurer card. Haru, traitor, male, wizard, level 7. Alice froze at the sight of the number. When he asked to see hers, she revealed that she was level 22. Shame rose inside him as he added that Letitia herself was level 55, far beyond either of them, and he told Alice she would be better off seeking another partner. But Alice simply smiled, bright and unwavering, saying it would still be fine. She suggested they attempt accepting a quest together anyway. After Haru agreed, the receptionist reminded him that he no longer had any funds, but Alice quickly spoke up, offering to cover him. Their first mission together led them to 4 hound wolves. The moment the beasts lunged, Alice moved instinctively. She drew her sword and struck the closest wolf with swift precision. Haru remained close behind her as another wolf charged toward him. Alice called out encouragement mid-battle, her voice steady. A third wolf sprang forward, and Alice met it with a clean, decisive strike. Her fast blade technique sliced through the air with force. Working together, they drove the pack back. When the final wolf attacked, Alice stepped in once more, unleashing a double slash that cut the beast down. With the last creature collapsing, she finally allowed herself to exhale. She surveyed the fallen bodies, counting them softly, 4 in total, and with the hound wolves defeated, their first joint subjugation near the city was successfully completed. Haru quietly admitted from behind Alice that he still felt like he was only getting in her way. Alice turned to him with a bright smile, reassuring him sincerely. She told him that he was incredible, that the battle had felt effortless with him beside her. She pointed out how unusual it was for a wizard to handle a sword so well, and how precisely he stepped in at the moments she needed him most. To her, he was a skilled support. Haru, however, dismissed it as nothing noteworthy. Alice only encouraged him more, insisting that it truly was impressive, and that he looked entirely accustomed to fighting. Those words drew him back to a memory. He remembered Letitia shouting at him, demanding how many times she had told him not to stand in front of her. She had accused him of trying to steal her accomplishments and ordered him to focus exclusively on supporting her. The memory tightened in his chest, and when Alice asked what was wrong, he quietly explained that it just felt like his heart had suddenly constricted. She grew worried, thinking he might be ill, but he brushed it off as nothing serious. Without warning, a king wolf lunged out before them. Alice immediately stepped in front of Haru and shielded him, taking the bite herself. She urged him to run. Confusion and panic surged through her. Why would a king wolf appear in a location like this? She desperately needed to pull Haru and escape, but she knew the wolf would overtake them. If it came down to it, she would have to fight alone. She told Haru she would hold it back and begged him to run. Terror gnawed at her. She might die here, but she had been the one to involve Haru in the quest. She felt obligated to protect him. Haru, however, questioned her panic, stating that it was simply a hound wolf parent. Alice stared at him, stunned, and asked if he had ever actually seen one before. Haru admitted that the first time he encountered one, he had been just as shocked. Still frantic, Alice insisted that he could not escape, and that something of this level was far beyond what a level 7 adventurer could handle. Yet before she could react, Haru defeated the wolf effortlessly with a burst of fire magic. As the scorched body hit the ground, he calmly remarked that the subjugation was complete. Alice's voice rose sharply as she demanded to know what kind of magic he had just used. Haru, visibly nervous, clarified that it had only been beginner fire magic. She shouted even louder, asking how he could possibly call something like that normal, because no ordinary flame could reduce a king wolf to charcoal. Haru, startled, repeated that he had already told her it was just a level 5 hound wolf. Alice corrected him, insisting that it was an entirely different species, its evolved form, a level 30 king wolf. She explained that even she would not have survived against it, and that it would not have been surprising if both of them had died. Haru blinked in confusion and asked who had told her such an unbelievable claim about it being the parent of a king wolf. He repeated again that it had only been a hound wolf, larger merely because it was a parent, and still nothing more than a level 5 creature. Then another memory surfaced, Letitia laughing at him when he learned beginner fire magic, telling him even children could use it. She had mocked him for getting excited over something so basic, calling it embarrassing, and warning him never to mention it to anyone. Haru sank into his thoughts, realizing once again that Letitia was the celebrated hero. She was admired by all, an adventurer truly worthy of praise, and because of that, he had accepted every harsh word she ever spoke to him. No matter how cruelly she treated him, he believed she must have been right simply because she was the hero. Alice called his name, pulling him abruptly back to the present. Only then did he notice that she was injured. He immediately cast a heal spell over her. As the magic took effect, Alice stared at him with confusion, prompting Haru to ask whether something was wrong, or if her wound still hurt. Instead of answering, she burst out in disbelief, demanding how a wizard could possibly use healing magic. Healing spells were meant exclusively for the priest class. Haru, suddenly uneasy, explained that heal was simply beginner magic. Alice reacted even more strangely, remarking that his understanding of basic adventurer knowledge was completely distorted. She insisted that something was clearly wrong with his adventurer card and asked him to show it once more. After examining the card again, she questioned when he had last updated it. Haru admitted that it had been 5 years ago, back when it had first been issued. Alice, exasperated, scolded him for never renewing it and ordered him to return to the guild immediately. Once they reached the guild, Alice submitted his adventurer card for renewal. The receptionist listed the renewal fee, and Haru apologized as the amount was far too expensive for him. Alice, however, said she would not be able to sleep until she understood how he had managed to defeat a king wolf and use healing magic, and besides, they had already earned the quest reward. Haru tried to refuse, explaining that the payment belonged entirely to her. Alice responded that it was for her own sake as well. She explained that Haru was unusually stubborn and reminded him that he had saved her life, asking him to allow her at least this much to repay the favor, or rather, she admitted it was nowhere near enough, and she would have to devote herself to him even more from that point on. The word devote made Haru suddenly flustered, and Alice noticed immediately. She gently scolded him, wondering if he had imagined something strange from her phrasing, and then laughed softly, calling him far too serious. The two of them shared that small moment of ease. Haru found himself thinking that being around Alice created a warmth he had not felt in years. He could not remember the last time he had experienced this kind of quiet peace. He pulled himself out of his thoughts and asked whether the high renewal fee meant the process was truly important. Alice confirmed that it was, explaining that an adventurer's card was their primary identification, and without an accurate record of his own strength, he could easily run into trouble when accepting quests. She questioned how he had gone 5 entire years without completing something so essential. Her words stirred another memory. He remembered Letitia telling him that talentless people were simply talentless, and renewing his card would be nothing but a waste of money. She had mocked him for not knowing his place and for managing to stay beside her this long. Haru answered Alice quietly, explaining that since he only handled chores, he had assumed it did not matter. Alice corrected him firmly, saying that adventurers were meant to renew their cards at least once every 6 months. But another thought returned. Letitia had never allowed him to perform even that simple standard task. At that moment, the receptionist returned with Haru's renewed card. She muttered under her breath, wondering why Letitia would go so far. When Haru and Alice looked down at the card, it revealed his status, Sage, level 82. The receptionist froze, staring in disbelief, unable to reconcile Haru, the so-called traitor, with such overwhelming power. Alice's eyes widened as she processed the information, wondering if Haru might actually be stronger than the hero herself, since Sage was a rare class that only a very small number of people could attain. Haru stood stunned, unable to speak. He had no memory of ever becoming a sage. He could not comprehend how he had reached such strength, and he truly could not tell whether he had surpassed Letitia, or if she'd had known his true power all along. The receptionist stood stunned, unable to process how Trader San could possibly be a level 82 sage. Alice didn't fully understand it either, but one truth settled in her mind. Sages were masters of magic. They could wield offensive magic, provide support, and even perform healing. That alone explained why Haru was able to use heal. Yet, even with the knowledge of his level, she still couldn't grasp the true scope of the fire he had unleashed. During this time, Haru sank deeper into his thoughts, upset and confused. He wondered why Letitia had lied to him. There was no possibility that she did not know. She was the hero, a special existence. He realized that what she had done to him had not been out of stress or care, but rather out of resentment towards someone who surpassed her. Before those thoughts could spiral further, Alice gently pulled him back by calling his name and mentioning that she was hungry. Once the renewal was complete, she suggested they eat together and added cheerfully that she wished to splurge a little in celebration of their first quest as a party. Even then, Haru remained caught in his internal struggle, debating whether he should reveal the truth about Letitia to her. Before he could force any explanation out, Alice quietly reassured him that he didn't have to speak. She told him that confiding could sometimes make a burden lighter, but there were also times when words only deepened wounds. She admitted she was curious about his relationship with the hero, but she said she would hate to be the cause of painful memories resurfacing. Haru asked if she was truly fine with that, and she reassured him with a gentle tone, lightly chiding him for looking so lost. Those words dragged him back into his memories. He remembered their childhood, the day he insisted on searching for a lost kitten's parents. Letitia had worried he would get lost himself, yet she had forgiven him and promised to protect him forever. But that memory collided with another, one where she claimed that serving as her shield and dying for her was the only value he had left. This time, anger welled within him. For years he had held on to the belief that Letitia would return because she was his precious childhood friend. Despite the scorn, the harsh words, and the constant dismissal, he had convinced himself that somewhere within her she still cared. Only now did he realize that he had been the only one who ever believed that. When they finished eating and stepped out of the restaurant, Alice smiled and commented happily that the food had been delicious. Haru agreed and apologized for crying in such a place. She reassured him calmly, telling him it wasn't something to worry about. In that moment, Haru told her that he wished to travel together from now on. Alice accepted with warmth, saying she wanted to repay him for saving her life, and added that, call it intuition, but she felt that if she stayed by his side, things would surely turn out well. Without warning, Letitia appeared and immediately spotted Haru. As always, she began with condescension, remarking that he was troublesome and claiming that his empty head must have cooled off by now. She then ordered him to come with her. Haru froze and instinctively tried to avoid her, but Letitia snapped, raising her voice and demanding to know what kind of attitude he thought he was showing. Haru calmly reminded her that he was quite certain he had already been expelled from the party. Letitia yelled back at him, insisting there was no way he could survive without remaining in her party. She told him to stop complaining and to return immediately. Then, with rising irritation, she demanded to know if he actually believed it was acceptable to disobey his master, claiming that this was exactly why he was a useless, talentless fool. In response, Haru attempted to reflect her own words back at her, asking if it was truly appropriate for her to speak that way. Letitia snapped that she had no interest in hearing his opinion. He pressed further, asking if she was unconcerned about yelling such degrading remarks in a crowded place. At that point, the onlookers began murmuring among themselves. Some asked if they had seen Letitia somewhere before. When recognition finally dawned, whispers spread that she was the hero. People remarked that they had heard she was kind, insisting there was no way someone like her would speak so viciously. Self-conscious under the shifting attention, Letitia quickly withdrew, telling Haru to come to the southern gate later. Haru watched her leave, realizing she had not noticed Alice at all. Alice then quietly asked if that woman was truly the Sword Princess, the hero he had always spoken of and traveled with. Haru confirmed that she was Letitia Planetus, the Sword Princess. He explained that her mastery of the sword was so flawless that it could captivate even during battle, and that she had defeated a sealed demon and earned the title of hero. All of those achievements were real, but so was the side they had just witnessed. Alice's expression tightened as she saw Haru's face darken with those memories. He then suggested that it was time to find an inn, since the hour had already grown late. After checking in, they exchanged quiet goodnight wishes before heading to their rooms, but before Haru could step away, Alice called out to him. She admitted that it might not be her place to say it, but reminded him that he did not belong to anyone, and that he should never forget that. Hearing those words, Haru felt a quiet warmth and thanked her sincerely. With that, they each retreated to their rooms for the night. Later that night, Alice noticed Haru slipping out of the inn. He was heading toward the southern gate, exactly as Letitia had ordered. When he arrived, Letitia immediately berated him, claiming he was late and demanding to know what he thought he was doing, making her wait like that. She accused him of biting the hand that had fed him and questioned whether he truly believed someone like him, whom she regarded as a servant, could behave that way. At that moment, Haru finally spoke. He said he had always seen her as his precious childhood friend, and that was why, no matter how deeply she scorned or mistreated him, he had endured it all. Then, with quiet clarity, he asked when he had ever agreed to become her servant, and why things had turned out that way. Letitia froze, stunned by his words, and demanded to know if he truly believed they were equals. She continued, stating that if he intended to push back, then so be it, but regardless, she declared that he belonged to her. She insisted she wouldn't allow him to leave, claiming that only she could save him, because she wished to keep him under her control. Hearing that, Haru recalled Alice's gentle reminder that he was not anyone's possession. With that memory in his heart, he told Letitia, calmly and without hesitation, that this was goodbye. Letitia was shaken by his declaration, her expression warping into something unstable. In a burst of outrage, she drew her sword and warned him to be ready to lose at least one arm or leg. Haru met her threat directly, telling her to go ahead if she believed she could. The moment the challenge left his lips, she moved. Her speed was breathtaking, and she unleashed Triple Splash, a top-tier sword skill Haru recognized instantly. Haru raised a shield spell in time, blocking the attack. The force of the impact drove Letitia backward. Frustration tightened across her features as she muttered that his magic was outrageous, blocking a top-tier sword technique with nothing more than beginner-level defensive magic. Haru then told her that, if she died, he would apologize in advance. Letitia snapped back that his fire would not work on her, and warned him not to get overconfident simply because he managed to defeat a level 30 King Wolf. After all, she reminded him, she was a level 55 hero. Haru replied that he would be using his full strength as well. A swirling mass of energy gathered in his hand. He admitted it was his first time releasing it, but since she was treating the battle seriously, he believed it was acceptable to do the same. She tried to stop him, but her eyes widened as the realization struck. He had been holding back the entire time. Haru released the spell, and Letitia was swallowed by the blast. Letitia could not accept that she had been defeated by someone she called a failure, someone she believed could never surpass her. Even as the truth settled in front of her, she continued muttering that Haru belonged to her. Haru walked toward her with a quiet sadness and told her that the outcome was undeniable. He had defeated her. He added that the years they shared, the bond of childhood friendship, and the 5 years spent traveling together no longer held meaning. With that, he thanked her for everything up until that moment, said his farewell, and turned away. Even as he walked off, Letitia continued shouting his name, insisting again and again that he could not leave her. She screamed that without her protection he would die, but Haru never looked back. He ignored her entirely and returned to the inn. By the next morning, while sharing breakfast with Alice, Haru apologized for not giving her a clear response the previous day. He then said that, if she was still willing, he would like to officially form a party with her. Alice brightened instantly and accepted without a hint of hesitation. She suggested that once they finished eating, they should go straight to the guild and register their new party. Then, barely above a whisper, she admitted that she was relieved. She had feared he might refuse. When Haru asked why she believed he would turn her down, Alice quickly dismissed it, saying it was nothing more than a misunderstanding. She shifted the topic, saying they first needed to decide on their next steps, and asked what he wanted to do. After a brief pause, she wondered aloud if she could be the one to decide instead. Haru agreed. In that moment, Haru remembered the time Letitia had told him he had no right to choose their destination, that someone talentless like him should never think and should simply follow her. With that memory lingering, he told Alice that he wanted to try going somewhere far away. Later, Letitia stormed into the guild reception, demanding to know where Haru was. The receptionist calmly explained that he had departed on a journey. When Letitia pressed further, asking for his exact destination, the receptionist apologized and stated that since Trader San was no longer part of the hero's party, his information was now private. Letitia then recalled seeing Alice standing behind Haru on the day she had tried to drag him back. Realizing that he had truly left with someone else, irritation spiked, and she shouted that he had always been such a handful, making her chase after him like this. The receptionist then mentioned, almost cautiously, that a wagon bound for Orlando would depart from the west gate. She hesitated, asking quietly if she should have said that at all, since disclosing another adventurer's movements was against the law. The receptionist calmly explained that she had merely mentioned the location of the departing carriage, nothing more. She added that she had been the one to issue adventure cards to both Haru and Letitia in the first place. With soft recollection, she reminded Letitia of the time when she herself had still been a trainee, when both Haru and Letitia were beginners as well, and how they had once spoken about making that guild their base. She continued, stating quietly that she was only a guild employee who processed whatever adventurers chose to do. Then, in a gentle tone, she asked whether the two of them had not once gotten along well. Letitia replied that she wasn't entirely sure what had gone wrong, but she believed things would be fine if she spoke with Haru at another time. She thanked the receptionist and took her leave. She walked away with unwavering confidence, fully convinced that everyone was on her side simply because she was the hero. In her mind, Haru was the one at fault, and she resolved that she would not allow him to escape her. As Haru and Alice continued riding in the wagon toward their destination, enjoying the calm breeze and soft sunlight, Haru asked her what kind of city Orlando was. Alice admitted that she had never visited it herself, but she explained that it was known as a famous citadel, and that the Lord's daughter living there was considered a saintess candidate. When Haru asked what a saintess actually was, Alice explained that it was a class granted only to those who received a divine oracle. It was said that saintesses were capable of using every type of magic, and that once they fully mastered their abilities, they could even revive the dead. Haru was stunned by the scale of power she described. When he turned to look at her again, Alice was smiling with bright satisfaction. She remarked proudly that she had done a great job changing his hairstyle, and that it suited him far better than before. She added that the haircut was much nicer compared to his old one, then asked if his previous look had never bothered him. Haru responded with a quiet sadness, saying that he was ugly and wondered if she found him unpleasant to look at. Alice immediately corrected him, making it clear that she was not criticizing his appearance nor his skills. Then she took out her mirror and asked if he had ever truly looked at himself and who had told him he was ugly in the first place. Haru admitted that it had been Letitia who said such things. She had told him that he was unpleasant to look at, that she was already at the limit of what she could tolerate, and that he should grow out his hair to hide his hideous face. Alice's expression stiffened at his words, and she asked why he had accepted what Letitia said without question. Haru explained that Letitia was an exceptionally skilled adventurer, and although she had recently become a bit twisted, she had always seemed correct about everything ever since they were children. He also believed that if he had not been her childhood friend, he never would have been allowed into her party at all. But Alice, visibly frustrated now, told him that he should have more confidence in himself because he was strong. Haru countered that she only thought so because he happened to be a level 82 sage, and even then, he did not understand why he possessed such power in the first place. She reminded him gently that he had been the one who saved her from the king wolf. He could have left her behind and fled, but he did not. And if he did not possess a strong heart, he would never have been able to do that. In her eyes, he was truly strong and cool. Yet Haru, with that same low-confidence expression, insisted that he only succeeded because he mistook the beast for a simple level 5 monster. Exhausted from repeating herself, Alice pointed out that he truly was unbelievably stubborn. Just then, a strange sound echoed from nearby. Both of them wondered aloud if it was a monster. When they reached the source of the noise, they saw several people already engaged in battle with death ant monsters. The girl standing at the front, directly facing the threat, was Nine-sama, the personal maid of Ange-sama. Nine, who always addressed Ange as Oju-sama, ordered her to step back and immediately released a flare blast toward the monster. However, everyone was shocked when even a mid-grade fire spell failed to affect it at all. Nine-sama urged Oju-sama to flee with the guards, promising that she would draw the monster's attention. As the guards attempted to accompany Ange-sama to safety, Ange-sama protested in distress, unable to accept the idea of leaving Nine behind. Panic rose in her voice as she realized that Nine-sama, at level 33, was the only one capable of resisting the death ants at all, while the death ants themselves were level 45. In the next moment, Nine unleashed her twin bolts attack toward the death ants, but neither shot landed. The death ants countered instantly, striking her down and injuring her in a single exchange. Seeing Nine collapse, Ange-sama ran toward her in a frantic rush. She knelt beside her, urging her to stay conscious and hold on, but her words were cut short as the death ants turned and charged toward her instead. At that exact moment, Haru released a burst of powerful fire magic toward the advancing monsters. Everyone in the vicinity froze, but Haru still felt unsure and admitted that he did not know if someone like him could truly be useful. Nine reminded him clearly that he had just roasted an entire swarm of death ants on his own, so he would certainly be of great help. Later, as Haru and Alice walked beside Nine and Ange-sama, they reflected on accepting her request. Alice reassured him that it was fine, and that continuing on foot alone would have been troublesome anyway. Ange-sama then stepped in, apologizing for suddenly requesting such a favor, and promised that once they returned to the Auden household, he would receive their proper gratitude. Haru tried to dismiss it lightly, saying there was no need for excessive thanks. However, Alice leaned in awkwardly and whispered that refusing gratitude from nobility was not proper etiquette. If they rejected it, she explained, the other side would lose face. She also reminded him in a quiet scold that speaking so casually to a lord's daughter could be risky. Hearing their muted exchange, Ange-sama stepped in gently. She said he could simply call her Ange, since she owed a debt to both Haru and Alice. In return, she asked if she might call him Haru-san instead. Haru smiled and responded that just Haru was perfectly fine, and that he would be in her care. Later, as night settled and they rested around a warm bonfire, Nine mentioned that they would reach the Crest Mountains by the next day. The cart, however, would not be able to travel through the mountain path, so they would have to proceed on foot from that point onward. After hearing Nine's explanation, Haru turned to Alice quietly and asked if she was comfortable continuing on foot, and she assured him that she was. He then looked toward Ange-sama and told her that her pilgrimage was admirable, calling her amazing. Ange-sama grew flustered at the praise and quickly denied it, insisting that she still had much to improve if she wished to become a true saintess. She explained that the people of Orlando were the ones who sent her on this path. Her father, occupied heavily with his duties, could not always spend time with her, but everyone in Orlando treated her kindly. She wanted to repay their faith by becoming a saintess. Then, in return, she complimented Haru, saying that from her perspective, he was even more incredible for being able to use explosion at his age. When Haru corrected her calmly, saying that it had only been fire, everyone's expression froze in disbelief, as though unsure if he was joking. Haru looked around, confused, and asked what was wrong with their reactions. Alice then formed a small flame in her palm using her magic. It was only a modest sphere of fire, and she explained that this size was the standard for the fire spell, simply a fireball meant to be shot at a target. Seeing the comparison and hearing the explanation, Haru was the one who became shocked. He asked what exactly had happened with the fire he had used earlier. Alice shouted at him, finally losing her patience, demanding what in the world that enormous fire blast had been if it was truly just fire. 9 added, though calmer, that Haru-sama was full of surprises, and that achieving such destructive power through a basic fire spell was beyond explanation. Still thinking about it, Haru asked 9 if she could teach him Flare Blast, if it did not trouble her. He admitted that he only knew 3 beginner-level spells: Fire, Healing Magic, and the defensive spell Shield. For a moment, everyone fell silent, staring at him in complete shock. Then Alice exploded again, shouting in disbelief, demanding how he could have traveled for 5 years and learned only 3 basic spells, when he surely had multiple opportunities to study more. Haru tried to calm Alice down and explained that he had initially begun studying magic on his own. However, Letitia had told him he was wasting his time, questioning why a mere chore boy was trying to learn spells at all. She told him to focus on splitting firewood instead. Because of that, he said, he never managed to move beyond beginner-level magic. After listening, 9 remarked that it sounded like there were complicated circumstances involved, and she understood. She added that she was not sure how much assistance she could offer, but if Haru did not mind, she would teach him Flare Blast. Haru was immediately thrilled and thanked her with genuine excitement. 9 responded that she would gladly accept a request from someone her lady owed a debt to, and seeing a young person with so much potential only motivated her further. Despite the praise, Haru became slightly nervous. 9 was, after all, the head maid of the Auden household, and the intensity of her enthusiasm made him suspect she might turn out to be a rather strict instructor. 9 began the lesson by explaining the fundamentals. Magic, she said, functioned like a puzzle. The caster had to shape the magical power into the optimal form. Elements and combinations, magic volume, density, attribute, distance, and trajectory, all of these pieces had to be arranged precisely. If any piece failed to take shape, or if the caster took too long assembling it, the magic would break apart and the spell would not activate. She then demonstrated the true Flare Blast and told him that if he put the magic puzzle together correctly, he would be able to use it as well. 9 asked whether he had seen the flow of magic clearly, since she had slowed down each step for his benefit. Haru began to attempt Flare Blast himself, but Alice suddenly stepped in, covered his mouth, and made him promise that if he ever released Flare Blast for the first time, he would hold back with everything he had. 9 continued, explaining that Flare Blast generally required about a month to learn, and mastering it instantly would be nothing short of miraculous. Alice whispered quietly that if it was Haru, he might actually achieve that miracle, then said aloud that no one would be firing any spells there, otherwise the entire area might be obliterated. The next day, they finally reached their destination, and Haru realized that the place before them was the entrance to a hero's grave, marked by a stone door carved with a maze-like pattern. Both he and Alice felt relieved that their journey had been so uneventful and that no monsters had appeared along the way. However, 9's mood shifted, her posture tightening as suspicion spread across her face. When Ange-sama quietly asked whether something was amiss, 9 admitted that the surroundings felt unnaturally silent, too still to be normal. Haru then asked how the sealed door was meant to open. Ange-sama explained that only a saintess could activate it, and the moment she touched the door, the seal would release and allow them entry. She further clarified that, after a set period of time, the seal would reactivate on its own and the door would close again, potentially trapping anyone left inside. She advised Haru and Alice to remain cautious. The two exchanged a quiet whisper, sharing the uneasy thought that a saintess's pilgrimage truly felt frightening. Soon after, Ange-sama guided them deeper inside, stopping before the coffin. She asked the others to wait, promising that she would not take long. As she began her prayer, a soft radiance rose around her, gathering and then sinking into her body. Haru watched in astonishment, finally understanding why people claimed that a saintess gained power during her pilgrimage. This was the moment that power was absorbed. When she finished, Ange-sama apologized for keeping them waiting, but as she descended the stairs, her foot slipped and she toppled forward. Haru caught her before she could fall, asking with concern if she was all right. Ange, her voice faint, admitted that she felt as though she was about to lose consciousness. Seeing her collapse, Nine's expression tightened with worry. Alice glanced at her knowingly, remarking that she had suspected Nine might have been forcing herself from the beginning. She then suggested that perhaps Nine had acted that way because she had sensed Ange's feelings and wanted Haru to remain close. Nine responded that she was genuinely impressed by Alice-sama's perceptiveness. Nine then spoke quietly, admitting that her lady was indeed worthy of becoming a saintess, but she did not want her to give up everything for the sake of others. She wondered what value there was in becoming a saintess if it demanded abandoning one's own heart. Before any divine role, she reminded them, Ange-sama was still just a girl. With the matter weighing heavily, Nine stated that they should return to Orlando, mentioning that a messenger had already been sent the previous night and the household was likely preparing a feast by now. But before any further discussion could unfold, a dragon suddenly appeared. Meanwhile, Letitia reached the fortress city of Orlando in her pursuit of Haru. Her irritation grew with every empty street and unanswered inquiry. Unable to locate him anywhere, she muttered to herself that Haru was probably wasting time somewhere along the path. At this rate, she thought, it might be better to retrace her steps and search the route she had already covered. Suddenly, the chatter around Letitia shifted as word spread that a dragon had appeared on the Crest Mountains, the very location of Ange-sama's saintess pilgrimage. The people of Orlando reacted immediately, agreeing that adventurers with advanced magic needed to be sent at once. Yet another voice reminded them that dragons were notoriously resistant to magic, and it might be wiser to inform Ange-sama's family before anything else. Among the conversations, two men quietly discussed a rumor that a male wizard with extraordinary firepower had saved Ange-sama, and that he had accompanied her to the Crest Mountains. The instant Letitia heard this, her composure shattered. She burst forward, forcing her way through the gathered crowd. Those she pushed past stared after her in disbelief, comparing her sudden charge to a wild, unleashed creature. As she ran, her thoughts spiraled, filled with frustration. She repeatedly muttered that he was a fool, insisting in her mind that none of this would have happened if he had only listened to her authority as the hero. But mid-stride, another realization struck her, that no one could defy her, and she would never allow it. Her pace eventually slowed, and she came to a complete stop. In the stillness that followed, she found herself asking why she had ever wanted to become a hero at all. Letitia found herself struggling with her own memories. Whenever she tried to recall anything clearly, a sharp and overwhelming pain shot through her head. The only thoughts she could hold on to were that she had to protect Haru, she had to contain him, and she could not allow his power to be discovered. She repeated to herself that she needed to exceed him, no matter the cost. She could no longer tell how long she had been trapped in that mindset. But then the realization struck her that everything had changed after the day she defeated the demon. As she tried to untangle the chaotic thoughts swirling within her, she decided that if everything felt confusing, then the simplest solution was to seal it away. She concluded that all she needed to do was lock Haru up. Feeling oddly proud of the idea, she called herself a genius for arriving at such a solution and once again broke into a run toward him. Meanwhile, Haru stood frozen in terror as he saw the dragon for the first time. He asked whether dragons were different from ordinary monsters. Alice responded calmly, explaining that they were entirely separate beings. Monsters were tied to demons, while dragons were a proud race beholden to no one. The only similarity between them was their shared danger to humans. She stated firmly that they had to run. Her plan was to detonate a flash bomb, and while the dragon was confused, they would escape. Nine, however, contradicted the plan. She explained that she had read about dragons like this in old texts, identifying it as a superior dragon, one of the extremely rare ancient ones in existence. Its resistance to magic was immense, so tools such as the flash bomb would have no effect. Before they could act, the dragon spoke. It confirmed that their assessment was correct and warned them against even attempting combat. Human spells and weapons, it declared, were entirely useless against its power. The only decision left for them, it added, was to choose how they wanted to die, torn apart or swallowed whole. Haru stepped forward despite his terror. He asked if the two of them could speak, noting that since the dragon used human language, a conversation should be possible. He apologized sincerely, explaining that if this was the dragon's domain, they had entered unknowingly. They simply had business at the hero's grave and would leave immediately afterward, and he wondered if the dragon might permit them to go. The dragon burst into loud laughter at his tone. It admitted that it was the first time a human had ever spoken to it, as if they stood on equal ground. Haru blinked, unsure what part of his words had been unusual. The dragon's gaze sharpened as it studied Haru more closely. Noticing his robes, it realized he was a wizard. With that, it proposed a wager. Haru asked what kind of wager it intended. The dragon instructed him to attack with everything he possessed. If Haru could make it flinch even slightly, then it would consider granting his request. Haru accepted without a moment's hesitation, prompting the dragon to mock him openly, remarking that the attempt would be futile, and that watching him struggle would be pitiful. Without backing down, Haru gathered his strength and released a full-power flare blast directly at the dragon. Ainge, Nina, and Alice stood frozen, unable to grasp how Haru had already managed to use flare blast. Only Alice remained composed, as she had anticipated it from the very beginning and had known he would be capable of firing it. Both Nina and Alice stiffened when they noticed the dragon still standing even after taking Haru's magic. Nina observed its astonishing magic resistance, noting that although its scales were burnt, it had endured the attack. The dragon muttered in disbelief, admitting that it truly thought it was going to die and questioning whether Haru was even human. Haru glanced toward Alice, acknowledging that listening to her advice had been the right choice. He had just now grasped the technique, and if he had not held back as she instructed, he would likely have failed. Turning back to the dragon, he explained that he had promised his comrade he would restrain himself the first time he used it. He asked the dragon to disregard the last attempt because the next one would be fired properly at full strength. Before he could continue, the dragon suddenly lowered its head to the ground. Haru froze, bewildered by the sight, questioning why it was bowing. The dragon confessed that it had grown arrogant over time. By claiming its title as a legendary dragon, it would wander freely, intimidating humans for its own amusement, and only now did it realize that someone like Haru existed, someone capable of making it feel genuine fear of death. With its head lowered, it humbly asked Haru for forgiveness. Witnessing that, Alice understood that Haru possessed enough power to defeat an ancient dragon. Haru responded calmly, stating that if the dragon had truly reflected on its actions, he did not particularly mind. The dragon praised him in awe, calling him merciful for having such overwhelming power without a trace of pride, and still choosing to forgive a dragon that had suddenly attacked him. In contrast, it admitted its own disgraceful arrogance. It then introduced itself as Sana and asked for Haru's name. Upon hearing Haru introduced himself as Haru Traitor, Sana immediately announced that it would become his student. Haru was taken aback and insisted that such a thing was impossible. Sana then questioned whether he was rejecting the idea simply because he did not want a dragon. In the next moment, the dragon disappeared from sight and reappeared before them in the form of a human girl. Haru could only stare, unable to believe that it could take on such a shape. She calmly explained that it was simply one of a dragon's inherent abilities, then stated that she would be in his care, addressing him as her master. Utterly overwhelmed, Haru turned to Alice, asking what they were supposed to do, but Alice was just as lost. Meanwhile, the girl continued calling him master, insisting with unwavering devotion that she would do anything if he agreed to take her along. When Haru responded that such a thing was out of the question, the dragon immediately declared that if she could not be his student, then she would become his slave instead. Before Haru could even react to that, Letitia arrived. When Haru asked why she was there, she threw the question back at him, demanding to know what he thought he was doing by making a little girl his slave. Haru tried to clarify that it was all a misunderstanding, but Letitia cut him off with anger, insisting there was not a single angle from which this situation could possibly be misunderstood. She then mocked him outright, even criticizing his hair. Haru asked her why she had followed him, and what the point of their match earlier even was. She snapped that it did not count. At that moment, Sana cut in loudly, declaring that the hero was in love with Master. She stated that Letitia liked him so much that she ended up bullying him, and even if she was a hero, she was still only human. Sana directly addressed Letitia, telling her that forcing her own feelings on someone else was unacceptable, and that she needed to consider how much trouble she was causing. Haru stood stunned, realizing that the same girl who had desperately attempted to become his student was now lecturing Letitia. He recalled that heroes had all their stats elevated beyond standard measurements, making their strength impossible to gauge by level alone. The only reason he had defeated Letitia earlier was likely because she had let her guard down. If she became serious, she could easily obliterate an entire mountain, and now Sana's blunt words were more than enough to truly provoke her. Haru understood he had to stop Letitia before she reacted. However, before he could intervene, Letitia exploded in anger, demanding to know what Sana was talking about and vehemently denying that anything of the sort could be true. Sana repeated herself just as boldly, insisting that people who loved Master should get along. Haru fell silent, briefly wondering if Letitia really did harbor those feelings. He then pointed toward the entrance of the hero's grave and told Letitia that they needed something from inside for their request, asking her not to interfere. But upon hearing Haru's words, Letitia's demeanor twisted abruptly. With a sharp laugh, she stated that if she simply claimed the area first, then he would be unable to complete the request at all. Without another word, she sprinted toward the entrance of the hero's grave and dashed inside. Ange quickly warned that the seal on the gate was about to close. Alice turned to Haru, asking if it was really all right to let her go in like that. Haru replied calmly that it was fine. Knowing her, she would manage to escape, though it might take a few days. On the other hand, Sana remained thoroughly impressed with Haru, referring to him as a cold-blooded master, and promising herself that she would never make the mistake of angering him. Alice quietly observed Sana's behavior, thinking that despite all of this, it did not change the fact that Sana would be accompanying them from now on. Later that night, while everyone rested, Alice noticed that Haru was nowhere in sight. Concerned, she went to look for him and eventually found him sitting alone. She gently reminded him that if he ever went off on his own, he should at least tell her first, because the two of them were partners. Haru apologized, explaining that his thoughts were in disarray. After a moment of hesitation, he asked her if, when someone confessed their love, she would feel obligated to accept their feelings in some way. Alice's expression dimmed at the sight of how troubled he was. She told him that she didn't believe acceptance was the only answer, and what truly mattered were his own feelings. Haru admitted that when he had been with Letitia, everything had felt natural. He had never even imagined leaving her, but that had been before he understood who she really was. When he finally confronted the truth and cast aside the illusion he had clung to for so long, he walked away from her. But after everything was suddenly overturned and she claimed to love him, he no longer knew what he was supposed to want. Alice answered quietly that she would always stand by him, yet this was the one matter she could not help him resolve, because she herself carried a hidden motive. When Haru asked about her hidden motive, he added that, thinking about everything, including the single purpose of their journey, he wondered if such a goal was even possible to pursue. Alice responded without hesitation, saying it was certainly possible, because there were no restrictions when it came to deciding what an adventurer sought. Haru let out a quiet sigh and said she did not need to answer right away. When he gently asked why she had chosen to become an adventurer, Alice paused, realizing that no one had ever questioned her about it before. She admitted that she had no grand reason, she simply had someone she wanted to meet. The instant Haru heard this, he reacted in shock, insisting that if her journey had been driven by a person she longed to find, then there was no time to waste letting him decide their destination. He urged that they needed to hurry and find that person. Alice then calmed him, explaining that she had already met them. She said she had succeeded in meeting the person she sought, and right when she no longer knew how to move forward, she crossed paths with him instead. When Haru tried to ask more, she rose to her feet, preparing to return to the others, and gently advised him not to catch a cold in the night breeze. Haru thanked her for the concern, and once she stepped away, he sat quietly with the lingering thought of who that person could have been, someone she desired to meet so desperately. Meanwhile, as she walked back, Alice kept her thoughts to herself, knowing it was far too risky to admit outright that the person she had searched for all this time had been him. Then the scene shifted to the past, returning to the moment Alice first met Haru 10 years earlier. Inside the wagon, young Alice sat with wide, bright eyes, gazing out the window. Her mother gently checked if she was feeling all right, and her father reassured her that she could look outside as much as she wished. Alice leaned forward eagerly, unable to hide her excitement. When the family reached their destination, Alice stepped down from the wagon and quietly expressed her amazement at how beautiful the village was. While her parents began unloading their belongings and settling into their new home, they told her she could go play for a while. Alice asked for permission properly and nodded with a cheerful smile when her mother reminded her not to wander too far and to return on time for her medicine. She walked through the peaceful village, breathing an air that felt fresh and clean. Eventually, she paused beneath a tree, feeling her heartbeat settle. For the first time, she realized she had walked this much without pain, and as she sat there, she believed wholeheartedly that if it was this village, then her illness would surely be cured. Suddenly, the bushes rustled. Alice shrieked just as a boy tumbled out, looking just as startled. He blinked at her, asked who she might be, and wondered aloud if she was the child who had recently moved in. Alice shyly shared her name. The boy paused, then gave a warm smile. He introduced himself as Haru and extended his hand. Alice looked at that hand for a moment before placing her own in his, and that small gesture became the memory of their very first meeting. Haru gently asked if she had come to the village for treatment. Alice nodded and explained that the dusty air in the city had only made her condition worse. When Haru enthusiastically asked if she could play tag, she lowered her gaze and apologized softly. He quickly suggested a slower option instead, offering to guide her around the village, and adding that he would look forward to playing with her once she got better. Alice agreed in a quiet voice, and the two walked side by side, hand in hand. Soon after, Alice lay in bed with a fever. Her mother stood at the door and apologized to Haru, thanking him for being so worried about her. Haru listened quietly, looking down with concern. Wrapped tightly in blankets, Alice thought about her frail body and how even walking once a week had been her limit. She wondered fearfully if Haru would grow tired of her now that she could no longer go outside. She stared through the window, wishing she could play with him again and hoping she would recover quickly simply so she could. Haru continued to visit, watching over her patiently. Then Letitia arrived. The moment she saw Haru and Alice holding hands while playing, her expression twisted with irritation. Later, Alice and Letitia sat together. Letitia complained that adults always scolded her for getting muddy, and Alice listened meekly. In a soft whisper, Alice admitted that sometimes she wished adults would say those things to her too, since she was never able to join games that would leave her muddy. Letitia was taken aback, and Alice immediately tried to correct herself, insisting she had not meant it in the wrong way. Letitia eventually smiled and told her that she truly hoped she would get better soon. Alice looked up in surprise, confessing that she had assumed Letitia disliked her, but Letitia strongly denied such a thought, making it clear she did not. Then, Haru appeared, arriving in a hurry and apologizing for being late. He asked if something had happened in his absence. Letitia, immediately overwhelmed, scolded him for leaving Alice alone despite knowing her body was weak. She turned away, flustered, telling them not to make her worry so much. After she left, Haru and Alice stood together quietly and murmured to one another that Letitia was, in her own way, kind. Alice watched Letitia's back as she walked off and wished that one day, when she could run freely without restraint, she would be able to play with her too. It would not have been an exaggeration to say that those days were filled with happiness. That time remained the happiest period of Alice's life. She walked across the open fields beside Haru, her hand in his, laughter trailing behind them. Her illness seemed to ease rapidly, perhaps because she had finally begun to feel content. And for that reason she had been unprepared. A festival was being held in the village that day, and Alice had been delighted because Haru had invited her. But then the attack struck, far worse than any she had suffered since meeting him. Dark, thickened blood flowed from her mouth as adults rushed to her side, shouting for help and calling urgently for the doctor. Because of their swift response, her life was spared. Yet even so, everything collapsed that day. Haru had blamed himself completely, convinced that Alice's collapse had been caused by him. He cried every day, unable to eat, and would often vomit whatever he managed to swallow. His body weakened rapidly, until his life itself was at risk. By the time Alice finally learned about his state, 2 weeks had already passed. She asked her mother in distress why she had not been told sooner. She felt she needed to apologize to him, to assure him that none of it had been his fault. Her mother, speaking gently, explained that Haru was no longer in that fragile state. However, if he were to see Alice now, no one could predict how he might react. Alice was stunned to hear that she would not be allowed to see him again. She then asked her parents, since they had studied so many forms of magic for her sake, whether her mother could use the spell that erased memories of those who had endured unbearable suffering. Softly, she begged her mother to remove every memory of herself from Haru's mind. Her mother tried to console her, saying it had only been an accident, and neither of them had been at fault, not Alice and not Haru. She urged Alice not to burden herself with guilt. But Alice wept, insisting that she could not allow Haru to suffer because of her. He had been her very first friend. Through tears, she pleaded with her parents to cast the spell and erase every memory of her from Haru's heart. In the end, the memory-erasing magic succeeded and Haru recovered, living on as though nothing had ever happened. To ensure the memories could never return, Alice left the village soon afterward. Those were all the memories she carried with her. Some years later, she eventually overcame her illness. She had survived with a single purpose: to one day meet Haru again properly, to stay beside him, and to protect him. If she had hurt him so deeply, then simply erasing his memories and vanishing was far too selfish. She eventually disguised herself by changing her hair color with magic, became an adventurer, and returned to the village. But by then, Haru had already departed with Letitia. Because Letitia had risen to the rank of hero, Alice was able to track their path. When she later heard at the guild that Haru had left Letitia's party, she was shaken. It was her first time seeing him since childhood, and she struggled to believe that the person standing before her truly was Haru. She saw that he was struggling, and quietly prayed that he would not remember her, so she could approach him freely. Then the scene returned to the present. Haru was gazing at Alice intently. When she asked if something was bothering him, he replied in a vague tone, saying that sometimes, when he looked at her, something felt familiar. Alice worried silently. She realized how naive she had been to change only her hair color. Altering her face would have been a grave crime, and even though she had taken a false name, her true one still remained on her guild card. Then Haru went on, expressing that he always felt at ease whenever he was with Alice, because she had a way of saving him again and again. Alice slipped into her thoughts once more, reaffirming inwardly that she would continue protecting Haru, no matter how long it took. It was her atonement, and it had become her reason to live. However, Letitia remained the complication. Haru and Letitia had once gotten along so well, yet Alice could not understand why Letitia behaved toward him the way she did now. In Alice's eyes, Letitia's fixation had become unusual. Haru had brushed it off, saying that Letitia was simply a bit distorted, but Alice questioned if that was truly all there was to it. She wondered what could have happened to Letitia during the years she had been absent. When they finally arrived in Orlando, both Haru and Alice were filled with anticipation. Before them stood the city like a grand fortified castle, worthy of being called a fortress city. Suddenly, a servant of the Auden house ran toward them, urgently calling for Nine. Nine turned sharply and asked what had happened. The man, trembling, urged her to proceed through the back gate. He explained that a troubling rumor had begun circulating in Orlando, that Ainge Oju-sama was controlling monsters and using them to attack people. Nine reacted with outrage at the absurdity of such a claim, demanding to know who would dare to spread something so indecent. But Ainge calmly stopped her and suggested they should listen before reacting further. When they arrived at the mansion, the Lord of Orlando, Cardinal Autumn, greeted them courteously and expressed gratitude to Haru for saving his daughter. He explained that he had originally intended to host a grand celebration in Haru's honor, but given the circumstances, he regretted that he could not. Alice then turned to her father, bewildered, and asked what exactly was going on. He admitted that he did not fully understand the situation himself. He explained that there were even witnesses claiming they had seen her controlling monsters. Nine cut in immediately, declaring it impossible and utterly illogical. Lord Cardell responded that the Auden household was already conducting an investigation. Nine continued, explaining that her lady had been on pilgrimage these past few days and had even been attacked personally by death ants. He answered that this was precisely the problem. The testimonies accusing Ainge had stopped the moment she left on her pilgrimage, and many believed that her being attacked by death ants, creatures that should not exist in this region, had all been orchestrated to divert suspicion. Then another servant burst into the room. Nine reprimanded her sharply for entering without knocking. The servant apologized, saying that the matter was urgent. A man followed her in and announced, after offering formal apology for the intrusion, that Ainge Ataman had just been issued an order of restraint by the Adventurers Guild. The man firmly stated that, regardless of her status as the Lord's daughter, she was expected to comply with the Guild's decision. Nine immediately moved to attack, declaring her intention to eliminate the suspicious intruder. However, the man effortlessly caught her knives between his fingers and, with unsettling composure, noted how frightening a maid she was before questioning whether she should not wait until someone finished speaking. Nine responded coldly that she had no reason to converse with someone who came only to restrain her lady. She prepared for another strike, but the man countered with a sudden punch, sharply reminding her to listen when spoken to. His blow never reached its mark, stopped midair by a defensive barrier that Haru had cast in time. The man, now intrigued, questioned the timing of the magic and wondered how Haru had managed such precise activation. He looked directly at Haru, referring to him as a young wizard boy, and observed that instant deployment of defense magic with that level of accuracy and power was far from ordinary. Before the exchange could deepen, Sana proudly interjected that even an ancient dragon recognized her master's ability, adding that Haru stood at level 83. Alice quickly covered Sana's mouth, stating that openly revealing someone's true strength was improper. The man then asked Haru if he would calmly hear him out. Once Haru agreed, he introduced himself as Jean Dainsleif, describing himself as an insignificant wandering adventurer. Officially, he clarified, he had been assigned only to observe the Saintess in order to verify that she was not involved in wrongdoing. Even the guild, he remarked, did not truly believe she was commanding monsters, for anyone who had lived in Orlando long enough understood who the Saintess genuinely was. The Lord of Orlando stepped forward to explain that their city was surrounded by formidable walls and had rarely faced monster attacks. Because it was a vital trading hub, many newcomers lived there, and it was entirely possible that those who had recently arrived would remain unaware of Ainge's purity. He asked Jean whether, after receiving numerous complaints, the guild had acted out of necessity to maintain peace. Jean offered a brief thanks for the clear summary and asked if he was indeed speaking to the Lord of Orlando. Ainge then stated that she would comply with the guild's directive, but Nine intervened immediately, insisting that Ainge owed no obedience to someone so discourteous. Ainge gently countered that, if the purpose of the observation was to clear suspicion, refusing it would only worsen perceptions. Jean expressed relief that she understood, repeating that the guild was her ally. He mentioned that he had no intention of following her constantly, though he added, completely unbothered, that he would not refuse permission to observe even her bath if it aided in proving her innocence. Ainge froze in shock, while Nine reacted instantly, pressing her blade to his throat and warning that another vulgar remark directed toward her lady would result in his head being sent flying. With tensions high, the Lord of Orlando stepped forward once more, deciding it was time to formally organize the situation. Jean suggested that there were likely only two explanations. Either the witnesses had been lying, or a false version of Ainge was responsible for the incidents. He questioned how anyone could impersonate her so easily when her appearance and presence were so widely recognized. Alice quietly noted that such deception was not entirely impossible. Altering hair color through magic was simple, but magic capable of duplicating another person's full appearance was considered forbidden. Haru, hearing her murmur, remarked that magic of that kind did indeed exist, and acknowledged her surprising breadth of knowledge. Alice, caught off guard, insisted that she simply knew small portions of many subjects. She then turned to Ainge, asking what the true purpose behind the culprit's actions might be. Ainge apologized, admitting that she could not determine any motive. Before the matter could be discussed further, a servant burst in, announcing that monsters had entered Orlando. The Lord of Orlando immediately moved to confront them. Haru stepped forward as well, stating that he would accompany him and requesting that Ainge and Nine remain indoors. Haru released his fire magic against the creature, defeating it in an instant. Sana observed the result with delight, noting that even a single fire spell from her master held immense power, exactly as she had expected. Haru then asked Sana if the situation seemed abnormal to her too. She responded by questioning why he assumed it could ever be considered normal. She reminded him that she had endured countless explosion spells before, yet never once had her scales been scorched. Nearby, two guards whispered among themselves, saying that ever since Ainge Salma's return, the monsters had clearly become agitated. They wondered aloud if the rumor might truly be valid, but the moment Haru noticed them, they stiffened and hurriedly claimed they needed to resume patrol. Haru realized then that the rumor had spread far more thoroughly than expected, and he began to contemplate who stood behind it and what their objective was. Later, once Haru, Alice, and Sana returned to the house, Nine quietly asked whether so many people truly believed such accusations. Haru replied that it appeared they simply felt guilty for doubting Ainge. Nine then remarked that this meant they would be unable to submit their report. Haru paused, momentarily unsettled, as the meaning of the word report left him confused. Ainge explained that she needed the priestess at the Grand Temple to verify the completion of her pilgrimage, yet she could not leave the premises herself. Jean responded calmly, assuring her that if he accompanied her, there would be no real issue with going outside. When Ainge sought confirmation, Jean reminded her that he had already stated the guild was on her side and that he would accompany her. Before the matter settled, Haru stepped in, clarifying that the guild's instructions for Jean were to monitor Ainge, not protect her. Jean admitted as much, adding that he was no longer young enough to be running around and had no intention of working beyond what he had been paid for. Nine erupted in anger at this, accusing him of neglect and insisting that if her lady were harmed, he would do nothing. Haru attempted to settle her, explaining that Jean's stance was justified. Adventuring, he reminded them, was not an act of charity. Adventurers accepted requests, completed the appropriate labor, and received proper compensation. If that system ever collapsed, their way of life would become unsustainable. Sana cut in, addressing Haru as her master, and pointed out that he himself had defeated the monsters prior without ever requesting a reward. 9 added that even during the pilgrimage, he had nearly insisted Ainge owe him no thanks at all. Flustered, Haru argued that it had been an emergency. Jean only laughed, remarking that Haru was quite the peculiar youth, wielding terrifying magic yet lacking self-awareness, and despite his cold demeanor, far gentler than he realized. After studying Haru intently, Jean noted that the world was wider than any of them imagined. Haru waved it away, concluding that regardless of opinions, having Jean accompany them as a guard should be sufficient. 9 countered calmly that a large company would only draw unnecessary attention and create a negative impression, so the fewer who traveled with them, the better. Alice then proposed that she and Sana patrol the perimeter, noting that if they acted under a formal request from the Auden household, it might help rebuild trust. 9 agreed to the suggestion. Sana, however, protested and insisted she wanted to remain with her master. Only when 9 promised to prepare high-class meat for dinner did Sana brighten instantly, declaring that she would perform her patrol duties with full enthusiasm. With that settled, 9 turned to Haru, her expression tense, and asked for a private word. She quietly questioned whether Jean truly had been dispatched by the guild. Haru confirmed without hesitation that he had been. He explained that they had already visited the guild earlier, and the verification was official. The guild had also explained their reasoning. Those too close to Ainge would lack objective judgment, so they had deliberately chosen someone with no ties to Orlando. 9 listened, still uneasy despite the explanation. Haru asked if something continued to trouble her. She admitted that regardless of logic, she could not bring herself to trust Jean. Something about him felt wrong, though she could not articulate why. She vowed that the Auden household would conduct its own investigation and pleaded with Haru to continue protecting her lady. Before Haru could respond, Alice appeared, having searched for him. She shyly admitted she had come just to see his face before leaving for patrol. She lingered, cheeks warm, until Haru gently asked what was troubling her. Alice then asked if it would be acceptable for them to remain in Orlando until all accusations against Ainge were cleared.